and welcome to my podcast. This is your host, Mariel Gorsuch. Tune in through the end so you can learn how to survive the age of constant quantification. Imagine it's 7 o'clock at night, and you look down at your wrist to check your brand new Apple Watch or Fitbit. You see that you still have 200 calories to burn in order to reach your daily 500 calorie goal. Do you feel motivated to hit your mark, or disappointed that you haven't already at this point in the day? In this situation, people make a choice to either feel content with themselves and not obligated to complete those last 200, or they are all consumed by this fact and immediately pursue their daily end goal. In this day and age, it's usually the latter. This leads me to wonder, how does quantifying our daily lives change the way we think about ourselves? I mean, what kind of effects does 10,000 steps a day and 12 standing hours have on the way we perceive the world? I believe that little by little, our world has evolved from the concept of quality of life to quantity of life. I mean, come on, when did fitness become about achieving a number and less about moving our bodies in ways that makes us feel good? It seems that technology has given us the ability to continually assess ourselves numerically. Though we've been measuring things about ourselves like our height, our weight, and our grades for a long time, it seems that technology has brought this ability to quantify ourselves to a whole new level. With each advancement, it appears that each assessment has become more and more minuscule. By this, I mean that the more advanced technology is more in our face, or more literally connected to us, like on our wrists in watch form. All of our data is immediate, and in society today, numbers are of high priority. This obsession with data regarding, well, anything these days, is detrimental to us, and especially our spirits, when there inevitably comes a time where we don't achieve a certain number. People are so plugged into tracking their workouts or getting a certain grade on something that they forget to enjoy the process and the reasons why they're working towards whatever it is in the first place. In the end, it's only a number, and the number can't account for human error, also known as bad days when we simply aren't feeling up to getting in those 10,000 steps. Our human need and obsession with quantifying the activities in our lives, mixed with the advancement of technology, has transformed once enjoyable interests into overthought tasks which diminish our self-confidence, and it is important that society recognizes this. It's nice to keep track of information and data, especially when it's about ourselves. And honestly, it's pretty amazing that we can predict such precise futures for ourselves in terms of numbers. For example, if we're tracking our calories, then we can get an estimate of how much we will weigh in 5 weeks if we keep eating those same amount of calories per day. Or, say you're in college and you're studying to be an accountant. Your career advisor might tell you that if you can get a certain score on the CPA exam, then you will be more likely to land a job at this firm and then make X dollars as your starting salary. These features of assessments are fascinating and can truly be beneficial, but should we read into them too much? What effect can the dependency on attaining a certain number on anything have on humans? Is quantification too good to be true? Well, I'm not sure. It might depend on what is being quantified. Take wearable fitness trackers, like Apple Watches. I stumbled upon an editorial published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, which dives into the benefits that wearable fitness trackers can provide to individuals with chronic disease. Such devices can cause people to be more aware of their physical activity and therefore motivate them to get moving. Fitness trackers also allow doctors to receive real-time feedback from their patients who are wearing these devices because they can prescribe them daily goals on their fitness trackers and then receive the data immediately. This capability also holds patients accountable to accomplishing their predetermined daily goals, motivating them even more to be active. Everyone, not just those living with chronic disease, can track workouts, set goals, receive reminders, and use their devices as a tool to achieve maximum fitness. Such devices can be very helpful and positive to individuals, but other sources shed light on the negative impacts they can have. The American Journal of Health Education published a study in which research was conducted on a group of 356 college students at Miami University. The study found that 71% of the 356 students reported using fitness trackers to increase their physical activity and also track their sleep. The other 30% of students didn't use fitness trackers for reasons such as it would only work sometimes, issues related to battery life, and wasn't compatible with my phone, or was diagnosed with anorexia. Wait, back up. diagnosed with anorexia, that seems like an important reason to discontinue use. Sure enough, this study wasn't alone. Another article, which discusses the use of fitness trackers on children, explained how fitness trackers can cause children to compare themselves to others and wish to be a different body shape or weight, which can lead to eating disorders or distorted body images. These unintended consequences are obviously not considered when parents are buying these devices for their kids. But should they know that they have the potential to arise? After reading these studies, it's apparent that fitness trackers can be detrimental to our self-confidence. But does this apply to other forms of self-measurement too? I looked further into more ordinary ways in which we measure ourselves, like through grades in school. Just think about how school works. You learn the material, take a test, receive a grade, and depending on your grade, you either know the content or you don't. How effective is this strategy though? Through reading a study published by the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, I've decided that test taking isn't so effective on judging the knowledge students have. Instead, it seems that students are inversely affected by the grades they receive on their tests. Grades are supposed to evaluate the performance of a student in class and understand in what areas they can improve. But according to research, for some students, grades may be interpreted as revealing their value or worth as a human being because they stake their self-worth, in whole or in part, on their academic performance. This might seem foolish to older generations that students these days feel this way about testing, but it makes sense when you understand how much pressure they are under because they think they need to do well to get into a great school or land their dream job. This pressure to do well is so counterintuitive to the actual learning process because instead of learning in school to learn the content and remember it, students are now only learning the content in order to do well. What about social media? An article published in the University Wire discusses how damaging social media can be to self-esteem because people judge their worth on the amount of likes or views they get on each post. According to a study published in the Journal of Research on Adolescence, psychologists found evidence linking social media usage to poor body image, dieting, and a drive for thinness and self-objectification in young people. When people measure their worth through the response they receive on their social media accounts, there is obviously a problem. People should not equate their personal value to a certain amount of likes, but the fact that many people do says something about our society. Another common method in which we measure ourselves is through numerical clothing sizes. Say you walk into a store and you are looking around and you find this amazing pair of jeans. It's obvious that you love them because the employee can sense your interest. He or she walks up to you and says, "These jeans are great. Can I help you find your size?" You blurt out, "Oh yes, a 27 please." The employee informs you that the jeans actually run small, so you may want to size up. This is where someone might feel stabbed to the heart, because according to a study published in the Journal of Fashion, Marketing, and Management, consumers typically have an emotional attachment to their perceived size. If people have to size up, they feel discouraged about their bodies, and they can't overlook the bigger size to see the reasons why sizing up could be better. People need to know that it's possible that the garment might not be designed to fit their body type, and that that's okay. Apparently, the majority of women's clothing in the fashion industry is designed to fit an hourglass figure, even though approximately 45% of females have pear-shaped bodies, whereas only 33% have hourglass bodies. If more women knew this fact, they would redirect their frustrations with their bodies and self-confidence to the designers who are stuffing their heads with false expectations. Clothing consumers, especially women, have trouble with their self-esteem when it comes to buying clothes because in their eyes, size 4 is beautiful, right? So it seems that there's always a method which results in diminished self-confidence and an overdriven motivation to reach a certain number, whether that's an A on a test, a 7-minute mile, or a size 25 waist. Since I now know that there are scholars out there who are aware of the unintended consequences of quantifying life, I'm curious to know how other citizens feel about letting numbers rule their lives. I began by researching the person I know better than anyone else, myself. I decided to discover how I feel about measuring myself when it comes to my fitness. I wore my Apple Watch for 4 days, and at the end of each day, I wrote down everything I noticed about myself while wearing it. Looking back on my autoethnographic entries, I found patterns in all of them which reflect how I feel about my watch. In short, I question whether or not my watch is completely good for me. I've read everywhere that they are motivating and can hold me accountable. But I just wonder if I should allow myself the ability to analyze something as simple as exercise so intensely. There was one day where I didn't wear my watch because I went skiing and didn't want to wear it. My daily exercise goals seemed so far away that day, and I think that is the way it should be because there is so much more to a good day than achieving irrelevant exercise goals. Days without my watch are really necessary because not being able to constantly check my technology reverts my perspective on life from a skewed one that revolves around measuring the quality of my days in numbers to one that is simply about experiences made and the people I interact with. After closely observing how my watch makes me feel, I began to wonder if other people feel as I do or if they view their watch differently. I surfed through the internet to find discussion groups of Apple Watch users, and I discovered one on Reddit called Apple Watch Fitness, Filling Those Rings Together. This group of 14.4 thousand Apple Watch fanatics discuss everything from tips for completing goals to favorite fitness apps and especially struggles and victories. Based on what I read, it seems that people take their numbers very seriously, and they are expecting them to be as accurate as possible. After observing this group for long enough, it is clear that Apple Watch users are extremely invested in quantifying their daily lives. In some comments, I saw people mention that they were feeling unmotivated to reach their goals, but those comments were far fewer than those in which people boasted about closing their rings. These observations don't exactly line up with what my research said about decreased self-confidence, because from what I noticed, everyone seemed more frustrated than disheartened. Either their watches weren't working correctly or they didn't get credit for the exercise they'd done, and that really created mental self-conflict among observed group members, because they felt like an exercise didn't count if it wasn't tracked accurately by their watches. My findings do correlate, however, with the topic of how numbers change the way humans perceive the world, because to the people on this discussion page, it seems that numbers are everything. There were multiple people who shared screenshots of badges which displayed that they had just achieved 1,000-day workout streaks. For people to be committed enough to work every day for 1,000 days, it can be assumed that they are not so in tune with their bodies since they aren't allowing themselves a single day off. It seems detrimental for people to be so dependent on their exercise goals to feel good about themselves and feel as though they actually accomplished something for the day. I really wonder what would happen if someone were to take away all of their Apple Watches. How would they feel? Would life suddenly have no purpose? I believe that to these people, life would feel unfulfilling because they are so used to measuring the quality of their days in numbers that if they were forced away from the constant quantifying and told to just enjoy the day and play it by ear, that they wouldn't be able to, since they are so accustomed to a much more intentional day as established by their daily goals. I learned a lot about how people use their watches from observing the discussion posts on Reddit, but I needed to speak to some people in person to understand just how relevant constant quantification and measurements are in the daily lives of regular people. I reached out to a couple of my peers who actively use wearable fitness trackers. I interviewed two guys and a girl because I was interested to see how their answers would differ. We reviewed everything about their watches, the brand, how long they'd had them, and what they love about them.
I use the Polar Flow Vantage watch. I got the watch from the school. All the members of the ski team got one.
I've had my Fitbit for about 2 years. Okay, because I trail run and I wanted a way to track my mileage, and my phone's kind of crappy with the whole entire GPS thing and tracking steps and that kind of stuff. So I wanted something that I could track steps and distance with. That's why I got the watch.
I like that it tracks my sleep and my heart rate.
I really like that I'm able to track a lot of things I was never able to track before, like my sleep and my workout.
Even though their watches are amazing tools, they all feel as though their mentality around working out has totally changed. They've become much more preoccupied with tracking their workouts and feel like they've missed out if they forget to wear their watches.
I definitely feel like it makes a hard activity like a run a lot more gratifying. Like if I were to forget my watch on a run, I would almost feel like there's less of a point to going.
I like to see the progress that I've had. So sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should have tracked this on my Fitbit. It would count more almost. I do regret if I work out without it. I do regret it because I feel like it's a workout that I could have had on my Apple Watch, so it had been tracked. So I don't feel like it doesn't mean anything, but I do feel like I lost out on recording that exercise.
This drive to record workouts proves that such fitness devices can really lead people to live more active lives. But is it a good thing for us to feel like a workout isn't as productive if we haven't recorded it? And how about goals that we set for ourselves through our devices? Should we really be trying to meet them every day? What impact are they having on our self-awareness and self-confidence?
I think that on days that I'm going to have a really good workout and that I'm going to exceed those goals, I feel really good about myself. But I think it also has the opposite effect on days that I'm not going to meet those goals. It definitely makes me feel like I'm lacking or should be doing more than I am. If I consistently didn't reach my goals, I'd probably feel pretty crappy about it. I'd probably just stop wearing it. But because I am pretty satisfied with the way I've been hitting my exercise goals, I keep going.
I think I am experiencing more being self-conscious about my times using the Polar Watch, but I think that the motivation you get from trying to improve kind of outweighs the lower self-confidence that comes with it. I can definitely see how some people would be prone to lower self-confidence after constantly measuring themselves with a device.
I think that sometimes I'll want to meet a goal so badly that maybe I'll push myself more than I would have otherwise, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. A bad thing because I'm not necessarily listening to my body as much, but it can also be a good thing if that goal is in sight and not that hard to reach.
I wondered if any of them were a part of any online communities to help motivate or inspire them, but it turned out only one of them was.
Yeah, I do use Strava. I've been getting into roller skiing, and it is cool to look at the actual Nordic skiers' times on that same track, and it will definitely motivate me to try and get closer to them. The competition adds such a different element to exercise. I think it's really helpful. Strava can actually be used as a pretty legitimate form of social media. Like, you can upload pictures to it. There's so many statistics you can look at that I don't even use of every exercise you post. One of my friends was saying he deleted Instagram, but then he spent 3 hours on Strava looking at, scrolling through it, the same as Instagram.
It seems that working out has become a competition where people can share every little accomplishment. I think these features help build communities of active people, but I also think they create opportunities for people to feel as though they fall short on the workout wagon, even though exercising is supposed to be an activity that makes you feel good and not a competition in any way. This idea led me to the other ways in which we measure ourselves. I asked my interviewees how much they read into their social media likes.
I think that I cared more when I was younger and I first started using social media. Facebook, I feel like our generation doesn't use it as much as Instagram, so I don't really care about Facebook and I rarely update it. But I do feel like when I post a picture on Instagram, I definitely look at who comments and the kind of reaction it gets, as I think most people do.
I use Instagram, but I don't post on it that often just because I never really think to. And I don't even know how many followers I have, so the amount of likes I get doesn't really cross my mind. As long as it reaches the people that I'm posting it for, that's what I really care about.
Social media doesn't affect their lives much or cause them to feel lesser because of online judgments. But when the topic of grades and test scores was discussed, they had much more to say about how such numbers make them feel.
It depends on the test. If I study really hard for something and then don't get the grade I want, I definitely feel discouraged and probably bad about myself. So it definitely has a negative impact.
I check my grades pretty often on Canvas. Sometimes if I have been gone from school for a week and I'm missing assignments, it takes a lot for me to check them because I know it's just going to bum me out. But at the same time, it is a pretty easy motivator to see that your grades drop from missing assignments. It makes it a lot easier to make time to get them done.
One example that comes to mind is the SATs and the ACTs, getting into college and stuff like that. Those numbers are so important and seem to represent so much more than they actually do or should. So people kind of base their smartness or other people's smartness off those numbers.
The question really makes me think of standardized testing like ACT and SAT. Because I think people know that it doesn't really measure your intelligence, and that if you just practice it, you can get a better score even though you're the same person and you're not any smarter. If you get a 20 on your first try and do practice tests for an entire year and then get a 30, I don't think you're a smarter person because of that. But if you get a 30 or above on the ACT, you have a pretty good pick of colleges, and that is definitely something that is a judgment set by society and not something objective.
We also discussed more general ways in which us humans assess ourselves, like through something as simple as our clothing sizes. One had more to say about the topic than the other.
Everybody kind of knows what their clothing size is, and sometimes if you go into a store and different brands are all different, so what your normal clothing size is can vary when you go into different stores, and that can kind of be weird. Like if you're usually, I don't know, size 6 and then you're size 8 in a pair of pants, or you're size 4, you like think you've gained or lost weight, and those numbers correlate directly to how you feel about yourself.
Yeah, I've never thought about that. I think ski boots, I'm kind of on the verge of where the point where they don't make boots my size, but clothing size has never been an issue. I don't do a lot of shopping myself either.
It was interesting to me that the girl had a lot more to say than the males, which could possibly speak to the fact that women might face more societal pressure when it comes to clothing sizes than men, but that idea in itself is a whole other fish to fry. To wrap up our conversations, I wondered if they think that all types of measurements are inevitably a form of judgment.
I think that numbers and types of measurement definitely put people into categories, and I think that as human beings, we're always putting people into categories based on like judgments and stereotypes and things like that. But I think that if people, are outside of the category or the space that they want to be or expect to be, it can be pretty detrimental.
I think maybe the most intense form of judgment is the judgment that is completely objective, which would be measurement and clothes sizes and things like that. That can be harsher than the judgment from people, which are just opinions. Whereas being judged by your clothing size is something that is objective and that no one really sets the rules except math.
After talking about judgment as a whole, I got the feeling that they've grown to live with it and learned to shake it off.
I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at shaking them off. But when you're younger and start to understand and start to work towards things like better grades, and when people start to think about their weight and stuff like that, you start to realize where you fit into these categories, and then you start to compare yourself to others. So I think it used to be harder for me to shake them off, but I think I'm better at it now.
I think that after experiencing people and the real world, I was able to shake off a judgment like that pretty quickly.
Judgment seems inevitable, and to those that I interviewed, it seems that they are aware of it, but just choose to not let it ruin their day. Through all of my self reflection and information gathered from multiple sources, including the internet and actual interviews, I've come across very interesting connections about how measurements affect the daily lives of humans. There are multiple ways in which as humans measure ourselves and quantify our daily lives. Initially, wearable fitness trackers like the Apple Watch were my main focus for this research topic, and I was very interested in exploring the effects that the ability to evaluate one's body have on how one feels about themselves. Through my scholarly sources, I learned that there are people out there who support the use of fitness devices because of their positive effect on weight loss and increased motivation to get moving. On the opposite end, though, I was educated on multiple examples of how such devices have negative impacts on people, like in the sense that they can lead to eating disorders like anorexia, and also intense habits like workout obsession. Through my own autoethnographic entries, I found that I actually enjoy my day a lot more when I'm not wearing my watch, and I feel less anxious because I'm not constantly feeling a buzz on my wrist with each notification I get. There is a huge population of people out there who are different than me in the way that they feel like their Apple Watches make their lives a whole lot better, as seen through the discussion I found on Reddit, which is made up of all Apple Watch users. They look to their community of fitness device users for motivation when they're feeling lazy or uninspired, and for praise when they are triumphant in reaching their goals. And the people I interviewed were either indifferent to the usage of their fitness devices, or they were really pleased with how such a device can track their progress. But it turns out that being measured physically isn't the only way people see their lives being quantified. Through my research and interviews, I've discovered more about the many ways in which society has influenced measurement in daily life, and I further understand how citizens handle this constant quantification. There is social media, like Instagram and Facebook, where people are encouraged to post about anything and everything, and base the quality of their content on the reaction they get from their peers, which comes in the forms of likes and comments. And then there are grades and test scores, which are observable at all ages, and can introduce excess stress and anxiety among people who feel adamant about achieving a certain score in order to get into a good school or land a certain job or meet a qualification. And let's not forget about clothing sizes, which are a more natural and arguably uncontrollable way in which we measure ourselves. Yet we criticize ourselves depending on our true size and can't seem to feel confident in our own skin if we're too far from the standard size. So how do these common measurements change the way humans think about themselves? After analyzing my research, I decided that in the end, every single form of quantification expresses judgment. The way we track our every move in order to reach daily goals and feel accomplished physically is a judgment of our activity, and we are trained to repeatedly assess ourselves in order to be active enough and lead what is considered a healthy lifestyle. The likes we get on social media are a form of judgment, and that is why people are obsessed with it, because in the online world, the amount of feedback that is received on a post speaks directly to someone's popularity. Grades are a form of judgment on our intelligence, and we are immediately placed in a category depending on the number we achieve, even though that number doesn't account for human error and can't possibly be an accurate reflection of knowledge. Our body measurements, which we use to buy clothing, are a judgment on someone's character, the way they're perceived as a human being. If your waistline is too small, people will judge you, but if it's too big, they will also judge you. Every assessment of ourselves results in an internalized judgment that has been determined by society, because it is them that determine the norm. And as soon as we deviate from that established norm, we feel bad about ourselves. So in the end, constant quantification of daily life is inevitable because it is everywhere we look. There are endless opportunities to receive judgment, and the impact of this judgment on the humans who endure it all depends on how they choose to perceive it. So wear the watch. Track your steps. But at the end of the day, if you don't meet your goal, find a way to be okay with it, because life goes on, and a certain number isn't going to change that.